Hi, I've decided to go back into making these videos after about a year's break, and I have to apologize for not having replied, I guess, yet in any case, to the people who did send me messages talking about their own experiences, and there were just a few, about 5 or so, and whom it may have been, I guess, beneficial for me to answer. I decided not to make any further videos because, well, I initially started doing them thinking that there would be a lot of people who would benefit from them and were really good in nature and would use these videos as a means to, how should I say this, manage to overcome their own experiences, I suppose, and to be able to do good with them, to be able to oppose whatever evil it was that, whatever evil individuals had caused them, the harm they had caused them. But having, I don't know, gone through life, I guess, for a few more months, I found myself encountering a lot of people who were, I guess, who had themselves had horrible experiences, but who were completely indifferent to the experience of others, I suppose, to morality even, and just saw fit for themselves to be, how should I say this, cared for, protected, supported in their lives, but at the same time didn't see beyond themselves and didn't see, I guess, how much harm they were willing to cause other people. It's surprising. I know I had read a lot about abuse victims, for example, bullying victims who decide to become bullies themselves. I didn't really believe in it because I guess didn't resonate with my own experiences, but over time I encountered such people, and I asked myself, was it really worth making these videos to begin with? As in, would it turn out that most of the people who I addressed, would they be the kind of people who saw justice for everyone and for everything, really, in all aspects of their lives? Or were they just people who either were okay with, I guess, causing suffering to others, or didn't want to cause suffering to others, but were nevertheless okay with not engaging against whoever it would be that would be willing to cause suffering to others? I guess I come to the realization that most people, even though they would want other people to help and support them and get them out of horrible situations, at the same time they wouldn't want to, I guess, get involved in conflicts or be willing to, I guess, save the day, because they just wanted to look after themselves and couldn't actually be able to overcome their own self-interests and in order to do what is right. I decided when I joined university, well, when I got a PhD where I'm doing my research, I decided to join several campaigning groups. I thought that if I went to them, I would actually find myself in an environment full of people who actually wanted to do good, and wanted to do good that was beyond themselves. I guess want to do universal good as opposed to just pursuing their self-interest. But as I learned, these people, even though they were doing some very decent things in some ways, in some aspects of their lives, even though they were, I guess, pursuing activism of certain forms that seemed on the surface to be really good, they were activists first and foremost for themselves and for their own ethical worldview. There's a huge difference, I guess, as I've learned, between ethics and morals, and I am a moral person by nature, whereas the people I was dealing with were, I guess, how should I say this, ethical, if I can put that in quotes, by nature, because their ethical worldview is ultimately, how should I say this, grounded in their self-interest, and if anything ever challenged their self-interest, they would naturally want to oppose that and, I guess, warp their ethics around their opposition for that particular thing. So what I found was that dealing with people in campaign societies, a lot of them were liberal, leftist, and I thought that because they were liberal, they wanted people to have the freedom to do good. Well, it also meant they wanted people like themselves to have the freedom to, for example, engage in adultery or to pursue divorce fraud, basically dumping their husbands and getting child support payments from them on a regular basis, essentially turning them to slaves. And so I find this very difficult to talk about, but all these people who seemed so nice and so decent at first, and who actually seemed like they really wanted to, I guess, fight for a better world, they just wanted to fight for a world that was more convenient for them. And as soon as I started talking to them about the things they supported that were clearly wrong, that were clearly malicious and evil, they became extremely hostile, and that was really shocking for me, because I had gone from a family that was abusive to an environment in school, for example, that was very hostile and cruel. Well, hostile and cruel. It was very, I guess, there were a lot of people who would be malicious if they just felt they had something to gain from it. And I went to university, and once I did get my first PhD, because I'd had a previous PhD before this one, I'm not sure if I talked about that, in which my supervisors were very abusive, and when I went to complain about it to the department, and beyond the department, the faculty, they all just closed ranks and started protecting one another, just being each other's cronies, in order to A, defend their own, and B, ensure that the university's reputation was not damaged. So and after that, when I did decide to join my current university, I found that the people were the same, even though no one was abusing me. That they had the same mentality. But afterwards, as I joined these people who I thought were, I guess, the last bastion of potential decency and goodwill, it materialized that they were perfectly okay with some forms of suffering perpetuated against some kinds of people. Again, they were leftists and liberals, so they were against, I guess, heterosexual men, and that meant that if, for example, as I said before, a woman decided to cheat on her lover or her husband, that was perfectly okay with them, because, well, she has the right to enjoy herself, and whatever bonds that were established between him and her, she just has the right to completely toss them aside and cause endless grief on his part. There's a lot to talk about in terms of what I experienced. I guess I'm just baffled, because naturally, being in this sort of environment, I know there are plenty of people who do talk about their experiences of abuse on the internet. Well, they don't post videos, a lot of them don't, but there are a lot of people who do write their stories, and I've yet to see a lot of stories on people who experienced hostility and harassment and so forth from leftists and liberals, who pretty much saw a heretic, a guy who wanted to do most of the things they were doing because he believed in right and wrong, as opposed to believing in, well, their ideology. In fact, there's so little spoken about in terms of these people that I would have to go into very, very detailed explanations to show what it is that they've done. But I'm just still reeling from it, because on one hand, I'm working for people who clearly don't deserve it. I would really rather expose them, but since they are not actually doing anything against me, and since they're not doing anything against anyone that I know of, I can't just there's nothing for me to expose, even though I did a few times see how they addressed the topic of bullying and harassment, and how they expressed a strong keenness, how they expressed a very keen desire to close their own ranks when this sort of thing happened. Now they were very happy when people didn't talk about this sort of problem, and just the sheer malice of it. And basically, it's easy to determine from people's conversations with you how they would approach certain situations if you start talking about these situations. If they don't want to talk about the problem, if they just want to avoid talking about it, then you've got people who don't want to confront it, who probably have confronted in the past, but who tried really hard not to get involved in this sort of situation. And that's what I found with some of the people I've spoken with in regards to workplace bullying in my university. But at the same time, I found people who were very keen on, again, defending the bullies. Just very evil individuals. And it's not like I can go to any court and tell the court these guys have an interest in supporting bullies, because wanting to do something doesn't actually get you in prison, unfortunately. Wanting to, how should I say this, having loyalty towards abusive individuals doesn't get you in prison. And I think that's, well, an absurd part of, I guess, the liberal environment in which we live, because it's easier, I guess, to, for example, get recordings of people when they talk about certain things, and so their choice of words, their choice of, I guess, attitudes in regards to things can show a lot about them. But if you go to court showing clear evidence that someone would be willing to support bullies if they were ever put into a situation of having to protect someone from bullies, or having to kick the bullies out, then the court will do nothing at all. So I know this is a huge rant. I'm just saying, basically, I've been living in this sort of university environment, and I was really hoping that people who are involved in the various campaigning societies would have been good people as they advertise, I guess, and that I could actually encourage them to see what was going on in universities, first of all, and second of all, try to find some way out of, I guess, the sort of social environment that I was trapped in. Just find a new social environment that was full of decent people, and they proved to be the exact opposite of what I was expecting. Likewise, I actually had a girlfriend for a period of time that I would say was abusive towards me, in that she, for example, she would just become really upset all of a sudden. I would ask what was going on. I would try to comfort her, and if I touched her, for example, just trying to caress her and ask what was wrong and show support for her, then she would immediately scream at me, get really angry. And I remember how she once, for example, the only, I guess, physical thing she did, throw one of her Rubik's cubes at me, she being a complete geek. Which, incidentally, I should mention, the fact that a girl is a geek has no bearing on her character, on her quality as a person, because, well, I've just met plenty of female geeks who are complete scumbags, and basically this woman just tortured me, I guess, psychologically for a period of time. I thought that I could convince her to, how should I say, grow out of it, which didn't really work. And her friends really stuck up for her, because, again, all her friends being geeks, being role-playing geeks, they all stuck up for her. Didn't matter what she had done, they just stuck up for her because she was their friend, and because she could have really strong emotional outbursts that, I guess, sway people into believing that, oh, she was a poor little victim, even though I had never actually shouted at her. Or did I? No, I actually never shouted at her. I did a few times just stated very strongly that I wouldn't have anything to do with her if she did certain things. For example, very early on, she just decided to flirt with another guy, who later on she dumped me for, I suppose. The whole point is that I just kept finding myself surrounded with complete scumbags, and I guess I didn't it wouldn't have troubled me so much if I knew that the police would intervene if I decided to get into a fight with them, if I decided to kill a few of them, because all these people with all their evils, all their the desire to, I guess, cause suffering and support others who cause suffering, and be involved in cliques with other people who cause suffering. It just, I don't know. I'm gonna finish this video. I will talk about these things because I do feel that my experiences, certainly in terms of romance and certainly in terms of campaigning, could help other people who had not been in contact with situations I've been in contact with, and maybe, I don't know, help them determine which people to help and which people to oppose, I suppose. Well, so I guess I'll see you guys later. Yeah.